Hey guys, back again with another video. This one's coming a bit late. My top 10 movies of 2016 video. I like to do these every year as well. This year, yeah, it's pretty late. A lot of these movies that I wanted to see, actually, I wasn't able to see them until very late, even leading up into like 2017. And there's still a few movies I missed that apparently were really good, but don't really appeal to me. I'll talk about like all the disappointing movies I saw, the honorable mentions and things like that at the end of the video. But I did want to do my top 10 movies, especially before like the Oscars happen. I definitely wanted to see all like the awards contenders for sure. But yeah, enough of the intro. I'm just going to jump right in with number 10. So at number 10 is Hidden Figures, and this is one of the movies that's nominated for Best Picture at the Oscars. I was actually not expecting to love this movie as much as I did. I thought it might be like a really kind of safe and predictable movie, and to an extent it kind of is, but it's just such an uplifting and fascinating movie about a true story that I hadn't heard before. I hadn't heard of these people. And it's just an uplifting, entertaining story about these three African American mathematicians working at NASA, and just basically how they kind of climbed, the ladder, if you will, and basically how, like I think one of them, well, really all three of them, were instrumental in getting John Glenn up into space. It's a really fascinating story, and it's really well acted. It's very like the pacing of this movie is fantastic. Like it moves at a really speedy pace, and just yeah, very strong performances overall by the three lead characters here, and then also Kevin Costner's in this as well. And I think it's actually probably one of his best performances in a long time. He's been kind of I don't know. He's been going downhill recently with his performances, at least for me. But yeah, this movie really kind of surprised me. It's definitely one of those movies that has a very important story behind it, and it's definitely highly recommended. And at number 9 is Hacksaw Ridge, a Mel Gibson directed movie. And you know what? Say what you want about him, but this guy can fucking direct, man. This is like I think every single movie he's done as far as like directing, I've really enjoyed. I don't think this beats Apocalypto for me. Like I love that movie. I think it's like probably one of the most underrated movies ever. But this is still a really strong film. Now the first 20 minutes or so are honestly kind of bad. It's really cheesy. Like you've got like this setup for this romance, like how he finds his wife, basically this main character, played by Andrew Garfield, and it's really fucking cheesy and hammy. But as soon as it moves into the boot camp portion of the film and then into the war sequences, it's really spectacular. This has got to be one of the most brutal and visceral war scenes I've ever seen in a movie. And basically, the kind of story behind this is just this character. I forget what his name is. This soldier. This real story. This is based on a true story. A real life pacifist who basically ends up saving like so many lives during the war without actually carrying a weapon or anything like that. It's a really fascinating story, as with Hidden Figures. I really tend to like these movies that have these kind of these true stories like this, and it's a very entertaining but at the same time brutal movie, especially with its second half. And it's really well done. Some really strong performances from the cast as well. At number 8 is another movie that's nominated for Best Picture, and actually Hacksaw Ridge was nominated for a Best Picture as well, but this is Arrival, and I loved this movie. I thought this was fantastic. It does have like one issue I have with it that didn't bother a lot of people, but it did for me a little bit. But this is directed by Denis Villeneuve. I think that's how you pronounce his last name. I'm not sure. He's a French Canadian director, and this guy, oh my god, like he's probably one of the best directors working today. I've loved every single one of his movies, especially Prisoners, though. Like Prisoners is one of like my all-time favorite movies. And this, I think, proves that he can do multiple genres. This is like this really heavy sci-fi film that's really thought-provoking, and it basically like there, it's a good thing this has turned out well because basically he's doing the new Blade Runner, and that movie's going to turn out great if this is any indication. So basically, it's kind of like an alien invasion movie, but it's very different. I don't really want to talk about the story too much. It's actually it will take a little while to explain, but the sense of dread and atmosphere in this movie is absolutely terrific. And then you've got like really good performances as well, especially from Amy Adams in this. But basically, the way the story progresses is always interesting, and the way they kind of build the alien invasion and really take its time with it, and then kind of add like a sense of realism to everything. In the sense that you really feel like how the world would react to a situation like this is exactly how it happens in the movie. It's really impressive in that way. The one thing I didn't like about it all that much was the ending. I thought it was maybe a little too neat, and I don't know. It reminded me of Interstellar a lot, but nowhere near as bad. Like Interstellar was one of those movies that started off so strong and like failed spectacularly with just like this really awful like third act. This movie doesn't fail like that movie does. I think this movie is a far better sci-fi film, but it kind of has some similar elements to it. But I really did enjoy this, and it's probably one of the better sci-fi movies I've seen in a long time. And at number seven is The Nice Guys, an early release in the year, but still one of my favorites. This is just like a really great buddy cop movie. The kind of movie, it reminds me of the kind of movies that would come out in the 80s a lot. And honestly, like good ones have been few and far between, especially nowadays. But this one's fantastic. It's got like this great, almost noir feel at times. And then it's got this great LA setting, and it's got like this interesting story behind it that just gets crazier and crazier as things progress. And then the two lead characters have such like the lead actors, I should say, Russell Crowe and Ryan Gosling have such great chemistry. And this movie is absolutely hilarious, like so many great lines, and then some really fun action scenes as well. Shane Black wrote this, and he's like a fantastic writer. He previously did Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, which is a similar kind of movie, like a kind of a buddy, sort of a buddy cop movie in the same vein. And this guy just knows how to write one of these things. And it's just a fucking fun movie from start to finish. It was so entertaining. And I love the way like the movie looks as well. Like I think the cinematography in this movie is really good as well. Uh, yeah, it's just the kind of movie I really liked back in the '80s, but they just haven't made good ones. But this one's one of the better ones, and definitely one of the highlights of the year for me. At number six is Green Room, and probably one of the more underrated movies of the year. I don't think this movie like made a lot of money, and I don't think a lot of people actually went out and saw it, which is a shame because this movie's fucking awesome. Now, the director of it previously did Blue Ruin, which was like this other great like kind of action movie. This is more towards like the horror side of things, but it's grounded in reality. This is my kind of movie because basically it involves like this punk band that's kind of like touring the Pacific Northwest, and they've kind of run out of money, and so they basically have to resort to playing a gig at this kind of Nazi club, like this Aryan kind of Nazi club, basically. And the band they kind of witness a murder, and they're kind of trapped in the green room, the type as in the title. And then things get they basically just progress from there. And this movie is super intense. And it's also got scenes of like violence that are some of the most shocking scenes I've ever seen. Like they just like the violence in this movie is very like it's not constant, but when it does happen, it's really shocking and effective. The way this movie uses violence is, I think, pretty amazing. And then it's got a really fantastic performance from Patrick Stewart, actually, as kind of the owner of this bar, this Nazi bar, and he's just absolutely terrifying in this movie. And yeah, it's the story in this movie is fairly simple. Like it's not like super complex or anything, but it's so well done. It's very similar to the previous movie from this director. I think his name's Jeremy Saulnier. I'm pretty sure. But yeah, this is the second movie he's done now that I've seen that's like really fucking good. So I can't wait to see what he does next. And I highly recommend seeking this movie out. Another actor that's in it was Anton Yelchin, I think his name is. He actually passed away last year, I think, like an automobile accident, from what I remember, which really sucks because he's really good in this movie. Like he's really fantastic in it. And I think he had a lot of potential. Like he could have gone on to do a lot of great things. Unfortunately, his life was cut short. But yeah, this movie really, really terrific. I will, I will warn you, it's a brutal movie. It's unrelenting in a lot of ways. It might put people off with its content, but it was my kind of movie. It's super dark. And the music in it I actually like as well. I'm a fan of the kind of punk music that's in this movie, but yeah, great stuff. At number five is Deepwater Horizon. This was actually a huge surprise for me. I was not expecting to like this near as much as I did. The director of it, Peter Berg, he kind of does these very like Go America type movies, but this one, it's got elements of that, but it's actually not too bad. Basically, it's about the BP oil disaster that happened a few years back. And this is one of the most intense movies I've ever seen. Once the disaster starts happening, the way it ratchets up is amazing, and this movie is filmed in this kinetic, like stylish way that I really liked. The performances across the board are quite strong as well. And there's this sense of dread leading up to everything, like that is just honestly extremely well done. It's a really intense movie, probably one of the most intense movies I've ever seen, and it's also, of course, very critical of BP. And yeah, I didn't know a whole lot about this disaster, so it was honestly kind of like a history lesson in a way for me as well. Which again, this is one of those movies based on this true story, this kind of horrific, awful, true story, but still the kind of movie that I do tend to get into. But yeah, I was not expecting this movie to be just so good. It really did surprise me. At number four is Moonlight, front runner for Best Picture. I do, it's not the one I hope wins, but I wouldn't be sad if it does win for Best Picture. But I think there's a certain movie that's going to win. But anyways, this is a really sad, powerful movie with really amazing performances. It reminds me of Boyhood a little bit, but this movie is actually good. Basically, three different stages of this character's life. When he's a kid, when he's a teenager, and when he's an adult. And it's kind of this character kind of coming to grips with his sexuality in Miami. And it's a very sad, kind of tragic movie, but at the same time, it's pretty hopeful at points as well. Yeah, it's the performances in this movie are like absolutely amazing. I don't think there's one performance that's better than another because he's played by different actors during each part of his life, obviously. So it's actually kind of remarkable that the performances are as good as they are. The film looks great. It's got a lot of like very interesting themes, very relevant themes. I think this movie is very relevant today, and it's a very just powerful, emotional movie. That's really like a lot of this movie I thought was like quite heartbreaking in a lot of ways. And unfortunately, I read some story that I like that at a screening in New York, people were laughing at scenes that aren't supposed to be funny. And there's like this whole article. I might link it in the YouTube description, but it's pretty sad, honestly. And it just I don't know. There's a whole lot to say about that, but basically, this movie, I don't know. It really kind of it really grabbed me, and I gotta say I was really impressed with it. It's really quite well done. Definitely one of the best movies of the year. And at number three is The Founder, a very late release, and it didn't get nominated for any awards, unfortunately. I don't know why, because this is like one of the best movies of the year. This movie is amazing. Like, I was actually really surprised by this one. Michael Keaton in this movie is so fucking good. This is probably one of the best performances I've seen in a long time. And it's a crying shame that he didn't get nominated for Best Actor. So the story for this one is actually really interesting, and again, it's one of those movies based on a true story, a really fascinating one. This guy, Ray Kroc, who's basically comes in as a franchiser for these two brothers that own this McDonald's restaurant. Back in, I think, early 50s, they started it. And it was basically these two brothers came up with this idea of like this fast method of like the way the restaurant is set up so that people would have their orders done in like 30 seconds when they lined up to get their food. And basically the story behind this is how this Ray Kroc guy came in and just basically turned this McDonald's restaurant into a giant, the giant that it is today. And this is actually a really kind of tragic, sad story because this Ray Kroc guy is a fucking piece of shit. Like, he is horrendous. He's fascinating. He's absolutely a fascinating character with a lot of depth to him, and played terrifically by Michael Keaton. But man, just a ruthless character. And it's no surprise that this would be the guy that would turn this kind of restaurant chain into the fucking huge thing it is today. But the two brothers, the actors that play them, do an amazing job as well. One of them is Nick Offerman, who's like kind of a comedian. He's known for comedic roles, but he's so fucking good in this as one of the brothers. And what happens to these guys, these two brothers, it's fucking tragic. And just, I don't know, like the story here I thought was just so interesting. And this film it's not the most subtle film ever, but the writing in it overall I think is really strong as well. Like, the dialogue is really snappy. The film has this great pace to it. It's not too long. And it's just got this great energy to it as well. Really fantastic. I was honestly kind of blown away by this movie. I was not expecting it to like it near as much as I did. And it's really a shame that not a lot of people have gone out and actually seen it, I don't think, and that it didn't get nominated for any awards. Definitely seek this one out. Really great movie. And at number two is Nocturnal Animals, and this is a weird one. When it came out, it got pretty good reviews. Not amazing reviews, but it got good reviews. And then, for some strange reason, a backlash happened, and now it's considered to be this terrible movie, and I'm sorry, I don't understand it. I thought this movie was terrific. I thought it was absolutely, like, amazing. Now, it is my kind of movie. It's super dark, it's super brutal, it's super depressing. But man, the style here is first what I want to mention. The director, what's his name? Tom Ford, I think. Basically, his movies, from what I've noticed, seem to have like a lot of style to them, like a lot of great visual style. The way this movie looks is just absolutely amazing. But the story here is actually, I think, really interesting. Where basically Amy Adams is kind of like in the fashion world in LA, and she receives this book from one of her boyfriend, husband slash boyfriend, husband. And she starts reading this book, and it's basically like this really crazy book where the events of it are playing out in real time. And this guy's the ex-husband is Jake Gyllenhaal, and then you see his story as she's kind of like reading the book. And I don't really want to say any more because one of the surprises of this movie is to see like where it goes. But there's so many great performances in this movie. Amy Adams is great in this. Jake Gyllenhaal is always as good as he always is. Michael Shannon is in this movie as this kind of like sheriff kind of cop, and he's just just super intense and like amazing in this movie. The dialogue in this movie is incredibly strong. It's very witty. It's very clever. It's funny. And then there's a lot of scenes of like really shocking violence. As with Green Room, the way this film uses violence is handled really well. There's also like Aaron Taylor Johnson is in this movie, and he's known for obviously being kick-ass. And he's almost unrecognizable in this movie. I knew it was him because I had read up a lot about this film, but I've heard of people watching this movie that watch the entire thing and don't know through the entire movie that the character he's playing is actually him. It's this really great fucking piece of shit character that's absolutely amazing. Yeah, I love this movie. I thought the ending was amazing, and it just fits so well with the themes of the movie. Yeah, I'm not sure where the backlash comes with this one. I fucking loved it. I thought it was just it was awesome. Like I from start to finish. And I'm definitely it's a movie I can't wait to see again. It's one of those movies that I think you're going to get more out of it every time you see it. It bodes well for like repeat viewings. I'm pretty sure. But yeah, definitely one of my favorite movies of the year, and one that unfortunately, for whatever reason, got shit on after like a few months or so after release. And at number one, my favorite movie of 2016, Manchester by the Sea, another movie nominated for Best Picture. I hope it wins. I fucking love this movie. It's okay. It's very from like what people have probably told you if you've heard of this movie is that it's very sad and depressing. And yes, it is. And granted, I tend to like these types of movies, but this movie is honestly probably one of the funniest movies I've seen in years. This movie is funnier than most comedies. And you know, generally I find comedies to be really shitty anyways, but this movie has this great dark humor to it that really surprised me. It's one of my favorite things about the movie. But the basic story is that Casey Affleck, in like an absolutely incredible performance, one of the best I've seen in years, he plays this basically janitor in Boston, and he basically receives a call that his brother has passed away down in Manchester, in Massachusetts, kind of like this Cape Town. And so he goes down there for like the funeral, and it turns out that his brother's son, his brother wants him to take care of his son in his will. And basically, the movie has him dealing with, you know, he's still dealing with the grief from a tragic event in his past, which I don't really want to spoil. And then it just basically from there kind of shows the relationship between him and the people that he left behind in this small town. Then the son. And the characters in this movie have so much depth to them. These feel like real people. And they're absolutely incredible. The writing in this movie, like the screenplay, it's definitely the best screenplay of the year. It's absolutely amazing, filled with wit, humor, and then of course just utter like sadness. These characters, a lot of these characters are very tragic characters, and I love those kind of characters. And the movie just has this sense of like melancholy to it that's very powerful. And some of the scenes in this movie are some of the most well acted and like strong like scenes I've ever seen in a movie. There's one particular scene where he's talking to his ex-wife, and this is one of the most like sad and heartbreaking scenes I've ever seen. It was extremely powerful, and the whole movie is like that. But yeah, like I said before, there's a lot of humor to it as well. The son character is absolutely fucking hilarious. Some of the lines he has just fucking made me like laugh out loud. So yeah, I think this movie balances humor and darkness and sadness in a way that's very smart and realistic. This movie just has this realistic feel to it that I just really appreciated. The film looks great as well. The only thing about this movie that I would say is maybe on the weak side is the soundtrack. It's this very kind of like epic, almost operatic soundtrack that I don't think quite fits with the movie and a lot of the scenes that play out. It's probably the only negative I could bring to this film, but overall, I just absolutely loved it. It's a film I'm going to watch many times over, I'm pretty sure. And it's the one that stuck with me the most out of every movie this year. It's the one that just I can't stop thinking about. It really kind of stuck with me. So yeah, a highly recommended movie. I really hope it wins Best Picture. If it doesn't, I at least hope it wins the Best Screenplay because man, Just an absolutely terrific screenplay here. But yeah, Manchester by the Sea, my favorite movie of 2016. Okay, so now let's talk about some honorable mentions and movies that I saw that I hated or thought were disappointing compared to the praise that they received. So honorable mentions will start off. Deadpool, I really enjoyed. I'm not a Marvel fan. In fact, I'm not a comic book movie guy in general, but Deadpool is probably one of my favorite comic book characters. And this was just a really entertaining movie. Ryan Reynolds was really great in the role. It started off a little shaky. That's why it's an honorable mention, but it got good eventually. It definitely did kind of settle into a groove that I liked. Neon Demon, honestly, I actually enjoyed. I didn't like the ending. The ending was definitely a weak point for me, but up until like at least the last 20 minutes, I really enjoyed it. I thought it had like this great sense of atmosphere to it. It was slow paced, but I thought it was fascinating, and it had this dark tone that I really appreciate. But yeah, I did like it. I did like it better than For God Only God Forgives, for instance. But it's definitely not as good as Drive. But yeah, a lot of people hated Neon Demon. It's definitely a divisive movie, but I liked it. I liked it overall. Um, Captain Fantastic is another one. Viggo Mortensen in a really interesting role. That movie I thought was just well done. It's quite the interesting movie. I think I forget which it didn't. I don't know. It didn't really grab me as much as I hoped it would. But I definitely like a lot of the themes in that movie, and that was close. That was close to making the top 10. That one, I really did like that one. The Infiltrator with Bryan Cranston was, I thought, a pretty underrated movie last year. Just a really solid crime drama. Nothing amazing, but definitely entertaining. Hell or High Water is a really good western. It's a western. It's a modern western actually, which I feel like we don't actually see all that often. Although honestly, westerns in general we don't see that often. So Hell or High Water was just a really solid western with some really great performances. A very simple storyline, but really well drawn characters that I liked quite a bit. And that movie is nominated for Best Picture, which I thought was kind of interesting. Imperium is an underrated movie that came out last year with Daniel Radcliffe actually trying to infiltrate this Nazi ring, basically, which is actually it's a really super like intense movie, and it's a really like actually surprisingly good performance from Radcliffe. I actually like that movie quite a bit. It's very dark, it's very disturbing, but I enjoyed it. War Dogs is a movie that got mixed reviews. I liked it. I thought it had a great energy to it. It maybe could have been a little darker, I think, and a bit more like dismissive of the characters. Like I think it kind of glorified them a little bit too much for my tastes. But at the same time, it was just a very entertaining movie with, again, an interesting true story behind it. Sully was a good movie. A really great Tom Hanks performance. It's one of those movies that I don't I don't know, like the story is really great. It's this great true story of heroism, but I don't know if it really needed to be a movie. Like it's the kind of story that you could do in like 30 minutes, like a short film, but I don't know, it felt kind of stretched out to me. But still, it's a very important, great story. And yeah, Clint Eastwood continues to be a really strong director. Doctor Strange is the only other comic book movie I saw this year. I liked it. I thought it was fun. I didn't know anything about the character, but I was actually kind of surprised with that movie. I thought the story was actually kind of interesting. It's got some really cool special effects, some great action scenes, and it's humorous. And for the most part, the humor works. So yeah, I was actually kind of surprised by that. It was very close to making the top 10. I like that movie quite a bit. Which is crazy to think. It's actually one of the few highly praised Marvel movies that I actually did enjoy. For instance, Guardians of the Galaxy like got tons of praise when it came out, and honestly, I didn't care for it. I didn't think it was that good. But Doctor Strange, on the other hand, I did like. Live by Night, Ben Affleck's latest movie, which apparently was a box office bomb. I actually loved that movie. It got a lot of shit. It's gotten like a lot of negative reviews. Honestly, I don't know what the hell people are talking about with that movie. I thought it was this really solid crime drama, like kind of like a mob epic. It's definitely his weakest movie overall. I don't think it's as good as The Town or especially like Gone Baby Gone, but it's really entertaining for what it is. Now, maybe I'm just like it's in my wheelhouse. I love crime dramas like that, but I thought it was just exceptionally well done and entertaining, and with a lot of like interesting characters in there as well, with some great action scenes as well. So honestly, don't be scared by like the reviews for that movie. Honestly, I really enjoyed it. I think Ben Affleck is 4 for 4 as far as directing goes. I think he's yet to make a weak movie. And then finally, a Money Monster, a Jodie Foster movie with George Clooney in there. That was actually a very good movie. I think its messaging was like as subtle as a brick to the face, but I think the premise behind it was pretty interesting. And it was a very intense movie as well, and then it was funny as well. The writing in that movie I thought was fairly good, but the plot definitely had some issues, and yeah, the themes of the movie weren't they weren't exactly subtle. But yeah, those are kind of the honorable mentions, and now we'll move on to the disappointing bad movies. Okay, so first up is Passengers. Terrible movie. I got bad reviews, so I wasn't expecting much, but Christ, was this bad. Just a really cheesy romance movie for part of it, and then just a really poor sci-fi movie for the rest of it. It's a shame, too, because it's kind of disappointing, because the concept is really interesting, and where they go with that concept in the beginning is actually pretty interesting. I don't want to spoil it, but how it ends up is just horrendous. There's so many Hollywood cliches in this movie. It's just one after the other. And honestly, I don't think the two characters, like Chris Pratt and Jennifer Lawrence, had like amazing chemistry or anything. Like they were fine, but I didn't think they were amazing or anything. And then the ending of this movie is horrendous. Like it is the most Hollywood cheesy bullshit ending ever. Like I hated it. And just a lot of like the plot points of this movie didn't make any sense at all. It just the script was really bad as well, like a really cheesy, hammy dialogue, and it's not an incredibly thought provoking movie either. Like sci-fi, a good sci-fi should be like really thought provoking, and this just I don't know what they do with the themes and plot points is just. It's just horrible. This movie was, oh man, it was really bad. The only positive I can say about it is that the special effects were kind of neat. There's one scene having to do with like a pool and gravity that I thought was really interesting and looked really neat. But other than that, I hated this movie. I thought it was pretty fucking terrible. Another bad movie I saw this year. I don't know why I even watched this movie because I'm not the target audience for it at all. But Nerve with like Dave Franco and some other actress, I forget what her name is, but it's like a young adult kind of movie with like social media where people like kids go on dares as a part of the social media program, and you can like win money. This is just a really fucking stupid movie. The story here is so dumb. At the end, I was honestly kind of in shock. Like how stupid this movie is and how nonsensical it is, and it's a lot of like these really cheesy, goofy scenes. A lot of like this, a lot of these romance scenes that I just thought didn't work whatsoever. The film has a good pace to it, and it looks pretty good. I like the look of it with like a lot of like the neon type colors and like the late night New York City setting. But man. Like just honestly a really horrible movie as far as like the story goes. And then Girl on the Train is another movie I saw this year that I hated. Like man, like this movie is really bad. It's one of those movies based on one of those books that are like targeted at like middle-aged women. Like the 50 Shades of Grey and things like that. So honestly, I was expecting it to be bad. But man, there is just like no filmmaking craft to this movie whatsoever. And the story is just meandering, and there's just like hardly anything to it. And it's just stupid twist after stupid twist. And honestly, I didn't even think Emily Blunt was that good in this. I think she's a great actress, but she just, I don't know, looked completely out of it for this movie, which maybe makes sense with her character. But I thought her character was just honestly kind of annoying. and honestly, I just hated her main character in that movie. The characters in general, I hated as well. It's an ugly movie to look at too. It's just I don't know. I thought it was just fucking terrible from start to finish. And I honestly, I think I'm done with these movies based on these like middle-aged woman type books. Gone Girl turned out great because you had David Fincher directing it. But like, geez, this movie was just awful. What else? The Shallows was another movie that came out this year that I hated. Like the ending of that movie is so fucking ridiculous. It's it's like this got this interesting story, but it's not a true story. I actually thought it was like a true story, but it's not. So they basically ramp up like the craziness in this movie. Like they ramp up the unrealistic like action type moments, and it just I couldn't. It was so hard to watch this movie and take it seriously. And yeah, a lot of it is just like nothing happening. I didn't think it was that intense either. And the CGI in it is laughable. Like the CGI shark in this movie is terrible. Like it looks so bad. Like yeah, that movie. I don't know. It got actually pretty good reviews, which I was surprised by. Because honestly, I thought that movie was terrible. Another bad movie, Zoolander 2, might be the worst movie I saw this year. Uh, like I love the original Zoolander. I think that's a great comedy. It's it's not like amazing or anything, but I think there's a lot of great jokes in that movie. Zoolander 2 is just basically the entire movie is just cameos. Like it seems to think that cameos from random people is humor. Which I'm sorry, it isn't. There was like maybe one or two good jokes in this movie. A lot of it was just like not even like stupid in an endearing way, just generally stupid. And yeah, it was just what a failure of a comedy. That is honestly that's a disappointing movie for me as well because I liked the first one so much. But Zoolander 2 was just awful from start to finish. Really disappointing, honestly. I don't know. I think the biggest problem though with that movie is just the fact that it's mostly all just fucking cameos, like and then references. Like, a bad movie. And that's I think about it for the bad movies. The only other one I would say is Hail Caesar, the Coen Brothers movie that came out last year. This is one of like the first Coen movies that I just did not care for. I thought it was dull, like just completely dull. Like I just nothing about it was entertaining to me. I didn't think it was funny. I didn't think the story was interesting. It just I don't know. It didn't do anything for me. It was just an overall boring movie. I can't say it was bad though. But what else? Sausage Party was a disappointed movie for me. The trailer was hilarious. Like I thought the trailer was one of the best trailers for a comedy movie I've ever seen. And then it turns out the parts in the trailer were the only funny parts in the entire movie. There are certain aspects of that movie I like. I like how the story is basically just like, just basically critical of religion in a smart kind of thought-provoking way. But the movie's just not funny. It's just a lot of gross-out humor that I just didn't think was very funny, which is a shame because that trailer was just really strong. And usually I like Seth Rogen movies, but this one just didn't do it for me. 10 Cloverfield Lane I thought was very disappointing. That movie could have been one of my favorite movies of the year. It starts out so strong. John Goodman is fucking terrific as this character that's held this girl hostage basically in this bunker. And the way the film progresses is really interesting. There's a lot of interesting plot twists, and then the ending happens. And then it just completely ruins everything that led up to it. And then ultimately made the movie disappointing for me. If it wasn't for that ending, if that ending was different, and people that have seen the movie will know what I'm talking about, I would have loved it. It would have been one of the best movies of the year, but fuck, man, just super disappointing that ending. Just completely ruined the movie for me. Silence was disappointing for me. I love Scorsese. He's my favorite director, but this movie just, I don't know. It was a slog. It was a chore to get through. And overall, the main story was never all that interesting to me. And there are some interesting themes with the movie, that there are some interesting questions it brings up, but overall, it was just a very dull, kind of meandering movie. I thought it could have been cut. Like a good 30 minutes to 45 minutes could have been cut from it. Some really good performances in it, but the accents in it were like off. Like they're supposed to be Portuguese, but like Andrew Garfield and Adam Driver are clearly not, and their accents are honestly kind of terrible. It's I don't know. There's a lot of weird decisions with that movie that just kind of failed on the execution front. A lot of people consider it a masterpiece, but I don't know. It just didn't do it for me. There's on a technical level, it's quite strong. Like the film looks great, and Scorsese, he knows how to direct. I mean, the guy's a great director. The movie definitely shows some filmmaking craft, but I don't know, the story and just like the general like pacing of it just didn't do it for me, unfortunately. Another disappointing movie for me was The Witch. I heard this was like the best horror movie of the year, and one of the best horror movies ever made. And it was okay. I didn't hate this movie. I didn't. It wasn't as disappointing as some of the others on this list. But I don't know. It's one of those horror movies that has like this supernatural slant to it, and I'm just not a fan of supernatural horror movies. They always feel silly to me. And this one did as well. I thought there was a good atmosphere to this movie. It did have a good sense of dread, and I loved the whole theme of these characters just getting crazier and crazier. Like they're like basically start losing their minds, and the kind of progression there I thought was kind of interesting, and kind of like the conflict between the people in this family. And there's some really effective scenes in this movie. I think it looks great. The setting is amazing. They filmed it in the middle of nowhere in Ontario, actually, Canada, where I'm from. And I thought that was a great choice because, yeah, some parts of Ontario are super isolated and make a great setting for a movie like this. But yeah, it's just ultimately it was sort of dull at a lot of points. The pacing was kind of sluggish, and the ending just I don't know. The ending just was not effective for me at all. I thought it was kind of cheesy. Um, but yeah, I think if you're into supernatural horror movies, you're actually probably going to love this. I think there is a lot to like with it. It just overall wasn't, it's just not my type of horror movie. I kind of prefer more horror movies that are grounded in reality, like Green Room, like I mentioned in the top 10 there. But basically, we're going to end off with the last movie. Probably I don't want to say the most disappointing, but out of all the movies that have received a lot of praise this year, this is the one that I don't quite understand it. And that's La La Land, the movie that's probably going to win Best Picture. It's going to sweep the Oscars, and I just didn't care for this movie. Now, it was going to be an uphill battle for me. Admittedly, I don't like musicals. I hate musicals. I think they're awful. I've yet to see a musical that I like. I find them just incredibly cheesy and just ugh. Yuck. I don't like them. So yeah, that was always going to be a problem for me. But the director of this, Damien Chazelle, he did Whiplash, which came out 2014 or 15. It was my favorite movie of the year that it came out. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. That movie just spoke to me on a personal level, as someone that plays the drums. I thought that movie had style. It had an amazing performance from J.K. Simmons. It was amazing. It was a fucking fantastic movie. So I went in with high expectations to this because I figured, well, if anyone can make me like a musical, it will be this guy. And no, this movie didn't do it for me. First off, the actual music in this movie, I actually don't think it's all that good. It's not particularly catchy. I don't think it's got like the melodies to it. I don't think are particularly strong. I don't know. I just don't think the music in this movie is that good, which is pretty fatal for a musical. Um, I thought the pacing was a little weird in this movie. There's stretches of the movie that go on a long time without any kind of music whatsoever. It's also the kind of movie that's so fucking Hollywood. Just Hollywood patting themselves on the back, which is probably why they got so many awards. It takes place in LA. It focuses on the movie industry for Emma Stone's character. And the ending is a little surprising in a way. I do actually like the ending of this movie. It's actually not typical Hollywood bullshit like the rest of the movie is, but there are parts of it that do kind of make me think like, oh, this is so typical. It has like this general like cheesiness to it and just like I don't know schmaltzy feel to it that I just didn't care for that much. Emma Stone and Ryan Gosling, honestly, they had fine chemistry, but I don't think their chemistry was that great. Honestly, I don't think it's near as good as what people were saying. The actual dialogue in the movie, I don't think is that great either. Like, it's okay, but I'm honestly kind of surprised it got nominated for Best Screenplay. The parts of the movie I do like are Ryan Gosling's parts, like the struggling jazz musician angle. I kind of like that, but we've seen that tackled in other movies to far better effect. Now, it's a different type of music. It was more folk music, but Inside Llewyn Davis, I thought, was far better at that kind of stuff. And that character, I thought, was far more interesting than Ryan Gosling's character in this movie, who's just honestly kind of irritating. I honestly kind of found him annoying. And then you have the Emma Stone part of the movie, the struggling actress or the aspiring actress. And for that part of it, I would just rather watch Mulholland Drive, which I think is a far better movie as far as like those kind of themes go, and kind of the aspiring actress kind of movie. Now it's kind of interesting the fact it can kind of combines those two together, this movie, but I didn't particularly find it all that engaging, honestly. And just the movie, just like I didn't hate this movie. I didn't hate it. I think it's okay. Like, it's an all right movie. I think there are parts that I did like about it. But it just, I don't know. I didn't quite see what people are so in love with this movie. Maybe it's because it's the type of movie you don't see too often. Musicals, admittedly, are few and far between. But at the same time, I don't know. It just didn't do it for me. I thought it was highly overrated, honestly. And I don't really wish it didn't win Best Picture. I thought Manchester by the Sea was a lot better, but whatever. I didn't hate the movie. It's not a terrible movie or anything. But it does have that kind of Oscar bait feel behind it. I don't know. I can't quite but help but feel like this is an Oscar bait kind of movie. But yeah, it ultimately did end up disappointing for me. There's a lot of movies this year that came out that I didn't actually end up seeing that apparently were good, but just have subject matter I just don't find interesting. There's that Swiss Army Man with Daniel Radcliffe and Paul Dano. Like, that movie sounds fucking stupid. Like, the premise for that movie sounds so dumb. Like, I have no interest in seeing it. 20th Century Woman apparently is quite good. Maybe I would like to see that. Edge of 17 I heard is good as well, but I don't think it would like make a top 10 or anything for me, even though coming of age teenager movies are kind of a guilty pleasure thing for me. There's probably some I'm missing, but generally it's if I didn't see it, I'm just not interested in it. There's a lot of clunkers that I purposely skipped. I know, like, Batman versus Superman and Suicide Squad were supposed to be terrible, but I knew they were going to be bad, and I don't like comic book movies, so I purposely didn't see those. So if I'm have the choice to not put my money towards those kind of movies, I won't. It's funny because those movies, like, a lot of people hate them, and a lot of people, even with the negative reviews, still ended up going to see it and ended up hating it. I don't really understand people that do that. But I don't know. Maybe at the same time, though, there's some movies that were reviewed poorly that you end up liking. I mean, Live by Night is a perfect example there. But yeah, I didn't see Suicide Squad. I didn't see Batman versus Superman. I have no intention of seeing them. There's a bunch of other comic book movies that came out this year that I have no intention of seeing. It's just not my type of movie. But anyways, that's it. A long video. What were some of your guys' favorite movies of the year? What were some movies that you thought were terrible? What were some disappointing movies for you? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.